Monday, April 6, 2020. Dear Mr. Trump, peep the slang. It appears we must remind you and your colleagues of the fact that your powers as Commander-in-Chief extends only to the resources and personnel available to you as Commander-in-Chief. That is the U.S. Armed Services. Your executive orders only have force and effect over the actual domestic population of the British territorial United States of America. The actual federal employees and equip allocations and should not be extended to or imposed upon the general population of this country, which is being harmed by these actions promoting a simulated war. We are forwarding a message to United Nations Secretary General Guterres this morning as a joint action of our lawful government and the High Council in charge of the precessional transition. The damage being done to the usable atmospheric oxygen levels by 5G is totally unacceptable and constitutes a threat to life on Earth. We are pursuing further action against various corporations and governmental services companies that have misdirected the use of artificial intelligence for corporate gain, including Elon Musk's operations, and the deployment of literally tens of thousands of mini satellites and millions of remotely controlled surveillance drones. These technological developments are all precedent to violation of the universal law of free will and won't be tolerated. Not now, not ever. We wish for these developments to be shut down and or redirected to appropriate subject matter, such as the collection of atmospheric data, mapping mineral deposits, and similar harmless, non-invasive tasks. These technologies are never to be applied to living people for crowd control or wiretapping their physical location or physical condition, except in the single case of verifiable rescue operations aimed at extracting individuals from life-threatening situations, period. The actual government of this country, the United States of America, the unincorporated state, has not declared any emergency related to any influenza outbreak. And after considerable effort, we have not been able to secure proof that any such influenza outbreak has occurred. Instead, we find evidence of below normal levels of common cold coronavirus infections, radiation burns, evidence of electromagnetic EM pollution that is off the scale, and people poisoned by denatured atmospheric oxygen, so that they exhibit symptoms of high altitude sicknesses. This taken together with statements made by St. Louis Federal Reserve CEO James Bullard, statements by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calling this a live exercise, pre-shadowing by the Bill Gates sponsored Event 201, and review of various civil disturbance operations protocol, such as Con Plan 32, developed by the U.S. Northern Command, lead us to believe that this is nothing but a mammoth war game, a simulated war on our shores, which we do not condone and protest in the strongest terms possible. We further conclude that this is being done to provide you with a backdoor excuse to procure large amounts of funding and allow the territorial Congress to make these appropriations under a false presumption that your national emergency is our national emergency. Got it wrong, buddy. In case it has escaped your notice and that of your rabid and self-interested advisors, our country doesn't shut down over common cold, has informed you of the facts and objects to any impositions upon the civilian population by the U.S. military promoting an unnecessary and obnoxious test of weaponized 5G and simulated war on our soils. We very clearly told the Pope and the Queen and you that no civil war was to occur here. Neither is any simulated war allowed on our shores. Shut it down. These actions are resulting in damage to the world economy and unnecessary obstruction of trade and damage to the environment and oxygen upon which we all depend for life. If generals are so brain dead that they think destroying oxygen is a viable defense of anything but anaerobic bacteria, you need new generals. The only emergency here is being caused by testing 5G for military purposes, in violation of the NMOD treaties and the G202P3 treaty. Your administration going along with this horrific plan, the endlessly twisted and incompetent mainstream media, and various generals who have clearly overstepped any authority ever granted to them by the people of this country. We are also sick and tired of hearing about all these sealed indictments that have been placed on the public records of every state of the Union. 160,000 indictments will no doubt require additional effort to process if you anticipate a normal caseload for the courts. But as the federal government subcontractors and their state franchises have been engaged in deliberate impersonation and pillaging under color of law aimed at unsuspected Americans, and as this result in the illegal subjugation of Americans under statutory law, together with their arrest and confinement under known false legal presumptions, all you have to do, sir, is correct the operations of your own administration and the operations of the territorial state franchise governments, and tell them to stop arresting Americans under false pretenses. That would clear out your court dockets and leave plenty of space for the persecution of actual international criminals engaged in crimes against humanity. Obeying the actual law of this country will also clear out the jails in short order. Release all the white-collar criminals who have done no harm to anyone or anyone's property, and you will have space to incarcerate 160,000 actual criminals with no trouble at all. This is just a drop in a very big and unjustifiable prison population bucket. Either get busy and arrest the actual rats responsible for snatching and selling our kids, counterfeiting our money, and undermining our country, or get off the pot. This is not a matter of politics, it's a matter of crime. If you want the support and cooperation of the American people, all you have to do is ask for it and be honest about it. You know what? You know that the actual government exists, that is properly constituted, and the vast majority of the states of the Union are now assembled and in a session. What more do you and any loyal military need to know? The military might of this country is subject to the civilian government of this country. We have one and only one contract with the United States of America and all its actual franchises, including the territorial state of state governments. That contract is Constitution of the United States of America. Any presumption that Lincoln's practice of issuing executive orders, including General Order 100, applied to all general populace then or now is mistaken. Any idea that the actions of any employee of a federal subcontractor should precedence over the actual direction of the employers and delegators of all powers granted to federal subcontractors is absurd. We have a lot of work to do in this country and a lot of time to make up. Our assets must be returned and recouped, and we must be assisted in securing our assets. We have been telling you and your generals the truth for many, many months, and all we get is dithering and dawdling insubordination, games, and plans that on average have very little to do with the public good or the public interest. It is certainly very welcome that the military is cleaning out underground bases of the criminal elements of the fascist DIA, but not welcome that the same military has adopted fascist means in the enactment of a simulated war. It is also well and good that someone, somewhere, has had the good sense to identify shutting down criminal religious cults and horrific, abusive human trafficking schemes. It is long overdue. We also appreciate your efforts to deal with the monetary situation, but that is something that you are all equipped to do without our help. Simply issuing another military script is a stopgap to deal with the counterfeiting of Federal Reserve notes promoted by Obama, but it does not supply you or the people of this country with what is actually needed, and that is an honest asset-backed economy with readily available credit. As we pointed out yesterday, the world economy since the 1930s has been based on illegal scrutinization of assets, the promulgation of fictional debts that are paid back with fictional money, impersonation schemes, hypothecation of debt, and similar fraudulent activity. The entire world economy has been run like a dirty casino, with the banks forcing people into instant prostitution. Excuse me. It has also been run on the totally unrealistic propositions of Keynes or whatever, Keynes, which required not only continuous expansion of the economy, but growth without the necessity of reinvestment of already existing assets. Compare that to making a hamburger with imaginary beef. So now we come to this dreadful precipice. Let me see what that is, G. Precipice. Never been too bad. Precipice. Okay. A cliff with a vertical, nearly vertical, or overhanging face. Okay. Precipice. Well, precipice. Well, y'all heard it yourself. Precipice. So now we have come to this dreadful precipice known as reality, that moment that Margaret Thatcher predicted when the politicians run out of other people's money, and not because the money doesn't exist, but because the entire system of doing things is predicated on fraud, especially the false propositions of indebting future generations of people, and relies upon endlessly expanding economies that doesn't exist. In actual fact, we have plenty of assets and credit to fund a new world economy. In actual fact, our assets have only gained value through all these years until one United States silver dollar is pegged against the 40,000 worth of US debt. But all assets and credit are vested in the land and soil jurisdiction of this country, and the land and soil belong to the people, not the federal subcontractors, any false claims notwithstanding. We, not you, have the right, standing, and ability to access and use the assets of the land and soil jurisdiction, a fact that our forefathers established to provide checks and balances upon the federal subcontractors. The old fraud schemes that allowed the United States municipal government and the United States of America territorial government to gain access to our assets have been blown apart and subjected to public international exposure. You cannot possibly expect to just boot up another round of the same old game, and you cannot, without betraying every element and principle of the Constitution, continue any venal predatory activity on our shores under color of law. So by operation of law, what has been stolen and abused must be returned to us and to our control, free and clear of debt or encumbrance. No bankruptcy protection applies for the principal responsible, who must either pay up outright or make arrangements with us to make payments, or seek specific forgiveness of debts owed to the American states and people. This is not rocket science. The Pope and Queen seized upon our assets and operated them their own profit and enrichment in breach of trust and invasion of the constitutions, allowing their presence on our shores. Millions of Americans through 6 generations have been harmed. They owe us more than they can ever repay. This includes honoring the national credit we are owed, returning our right, title, and interest in our land and soil assets as required by the Constitution, and returning our physical assets and intellectual property, which are also material interests. This is required by operation of international and global law and cannot be sidestepped and kicked down the road anymore. This might look like an OMG situation, not prospect of solution, but look again. The assets and credit undeniably belong to the American states and people and are rightfully under the control of their actual factual government, the United States of America, which is present and properly constituted and assembled. The reset, the return of the physical assets and rights attended has already happened and is vested in us. And now all this is required is a return to a normal course of business with normal public elections to public offices and normal loans based on actual assets and normal carriage accounting instead of double accrual accounting, and normal control of the U.S. military by the actual civilian court government of this country. Read that. We are home. We have the assets and the credit to pay the military. In fact, almost all the assets of this country have been piled up in our jurisdiction, which creates a great balance of the world economic system. While everyone else has been functioning on credit, who do you suppose has been presumed to be extending that credit and therefore receiving back your debts as credit ourselves? Anyone who says otherwise is a self-evident liar. The Queen knows it, the Pope knows it, and now you and anyone reading this knows it or hearing this knows it. Your administrations must without further delay contact John Franklin Hine III and establish the means to move the legacy trust assets and actual money and verified credit back into circulation. Mr. Mnuchin, in his capacity as an Interpol officer and as both private and public fiduciary, needs to get on the stick and set up the necessary mercantile bank accounts to do this. Please note that our lawful persons appear in the same exact style as our legal persons. John Michael Doe. The same presumptions that were used to unlawfully convert our assets can now be applied to reverse to establish lawful conversions of our assets. As they cross back over the bar, the debts become credits. In view of the great fraud that has been practiced against us, the World Court has no option but to recognize our right to do this and our government's right to secure all international and public property interests owed to all states and people. So turn your frown upside down and stop puzzling over this. It's ours. We claimed it fair and square. We preserved it and earned it. And it's okay because it's in hands of loyal Americans. Now what has to happen is for your administration and our military to come to its senses, stop playing war games on our soil and imposing on our populace, and instead assist us as our loyal employees, the way it always should have been. Finally, we wish for all false claims against China and the Chinese government seeking to blame it or seek damages for the factual, non-existent COVID-19 outbreak to cease and desist. Take a look at the new British $20 note, where you will see a holograph of a 5G tower surmounted by the laboratory symbol for the coronavirus. We do indeed know who is responsible for all this disruption and malfeasance, and it isn't China. And you can look on my YouTube page and you can see the $20 bill on there. Like the American states and people, China is accredited of the U.S. and is being deliberately lied about in an attempt to force China to pay the U.S. an amount in damages equal to the trade deficit. Nobody is fooled by this, and no decent thinking person agrees with the outrageous course of action. The trade deficit with China, like the trade deficit with the American states and people, can't be addressed with smoke mirrors, lies, and more obnoxious military nonsense. It can only be addressed by paying back or earning back the balance of trade, which can expeditiously be accomplished via returning the national credit owed to China via the same lawful conversion process that is necessary to return the national credit owed to the American states and people. You have cause to know that the Queen operates under our delegated authority, and that when her government or the government of Westminster gives you an order contrary to our good or contrary to the public interest to this country, your duty is to shove it up the Queen's rump and not follow any criminal or repugnant order. The lessons of Nuremberg stand before you and anyone else. Once the credit and assets are properly revenued, the Chinese trade deficit would naturally disappear. The Chinese will be happy, and we will be happy. And the Queen and Pope may be several pounds lighter in their bank accounts, but should be content to escape with their lives. Stop trying to blame China for something that Westminster clearly admits to.